In this lesson, we're going to start talking about the International Mechanical Code with refrigeration. Now, Section 11 deals with most of the refrigeration, that includes air conditioning, by the way, parts of the International Mechanical Code. 11.01 or 1101.2 defines the general areas that this code covers. Okay, things like equipment, the UL listings, the fact that the appliances need to be UL listed, and the requirements that everything is installed in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. That is pretty important and standard throughout the codes. 1101.3 says that everything has to be protected in an approved manner. Section 1101.4 talks about if you have a water supply connection, the water supply connection has to comply with International Plumbing Code, which is another one of the international code books that's available from the ICC. Section 1101.6 talks about general requirements. Okay, talks about ASHRAE 15. Okay, and ammonia-based refrigeration systems. So the ICC does not stand alone. International code does not stand alone. It references a number of other standards and codes that all have to be complied with. 11017 says that mechanical refrigeration systems have to be maintained in proper operating condition, free from accumulations of oil, dirt, waste, excessive corrosions, other debris, and leaks. So once the equipment is installed, it's up to the owner of the equipment to make sure that they continue to follow the codes with regard to maintenance. 1101.8 talks about changing refrigerant types. Okay, it says that the type of refrigerant in a refrigeration system having a refrigerant circuit containing more than 220 pounds of a group A1 or 30 pounds of any other group shall not be changed without prior notification to the code official and compliance with applicable law. Okay, they do not want you to be switching refrigerant types of things that have large quantities of refrigeration without talking to a code official. There's a fire safety and protection from asphyxiation part about this. 11021 talks about general refrigeration and system classifications, allowable refrigerants, mechanical quantity, enclosure requirements, and field pressure test requirements. Okay. 1104 also talks about occupancy and equipment and appliance locations. It will also refer you back to Chapter 3. 1102.2.1 talks about mixing refrigerants. You cannot mix refrigerants. 1102.2 talks about purity of refrigerants. And again, talks about references back to other standards. There is an exception that purity specifications set by manufacturers is exceptions. 1102.2.2.1. So again, you'll notice that all of these numbers become subchapters. Okay, new refrigerants, recovered refrigerants are defined, reclaimed refrigerants are defined. Now remember, the code standards can make things more difficult on a local level. However, the EPA laws in the United States also come into play. So your EPA 608 exam and testing and all the material covered in that is the highest. Cannot use contaminated refrigerants. And again, contaminated refrigerants under EPA rules cannot be used. Okay, locations of refrigerant systems are described by occupancy classifications. Okay, where equipment and appliances other than piping are located outside of a building and within any 20 feet of any building, okay, you have to worry about occupancy. Institutional occupancy is a portion of premises because they are disabled, debilitated, or confined occupants cannot readily leave. Okay, public assembly occupancy is a portion of premises where a large number of people congregate, from which occupants cannot quickly vacate from space. Residential is where occupants live, independent living facilities. Residential also can be dormitories, hotel, multi-unit apartments, and private residence. Commercial occupancy is the portion of premises from which people transact business. All of this has to do with getting people out of a space without a problem. Large mercantile occupancy is basically where more than 100 people congregates at levels on or below street level. Industrial occupancy is areas that are not open to the public. It's where access is controlled, and areas that are used to manufacture, process, or store goods such as chemicals, food, ice, meat, or petroleum. Mixed occupancy occurs when two more occupancies are located within the same building. When each occupancy is isolated from the rest of the building by tight walls, floors, and ceilings, and self-closing doors, the requirements for each occupancy shall apply to its own portion of the building. When various occupancies are not isolated, the occupancy having the most stringent requirements shall be the governing occupancy. Okay. System classifications. Their refrigeration systems are classified according to the degree of probability that refrigerant leaks from a failed component seal could enter an occupied area. So for refrigeration, it's based on the probability of leaks, not the temperatures to which the system cools. Okay, this chart is a table 1103.1, talks about the different refrigerants and talks about the amount of refrigerant that's allowed to be per occupied space. This all has to do with asphyxiation hazards and fire hazards. The refrigeration occupancy and system classification cited in this table should be determined in accordance with 1103.1, 032, 033. And notice again, they're saying that this is the general occupancy, but it's also taking into account the other versions of code. Okay, machinery rooms are defined. Talks about what can be in a refrigerant machinery room. Talks about blends and different types of refrigerants, and talks about exceptions to the machinery room classifications. Okay, then it refers back to tables, the table 11031 with all the refrigerant types. It will be reduced by 50% for all areas of institutional occupancy except kitchens, laboratories, and mortuaries. In other words, they're saying, yeah, because institutional occupants cannot get out as fast, okay, it's reduced. Okay, and then we continue to go through where the floor areas are and what's allowed in institutional occupancies. Okay, all refrigerant containing parts and systems exceeding 100 horsepower drive power, except evaporators used for refrigeration, dehumidification, condensers used for heating, control, and pressure relief valves, shall be located either outdoors or in a machinery room. So code, the whole purpose of us going over code in this course is so that you can find things easily in the code book. And you have to remember to look for other references in the code book. In other words, we talked in here about section 1104 that talks about institutional occupancy. And the institutional occupancy refers back to 1103, 1101, and 1102 for parts of the code. So you have to look for these cross references. We looked at one area of this code reference that said refer to International Plumbing Code. Well, you have to go back and refer to International Plumbing Code to figure out how to hook up properly connections to the domestic water supply and the wastewater. So code is a complex thing. You cannot memorize it. You just have to know how to find it.